All right, I'd like to introduce Lindsay Young. She's our financial aid officer for the Grand Rapids and Lansing campuses, but she's very knowledgeable about the financial aid processes, and she's going to answer all your questions and give you very valuable information on financial aid.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Like Tracy said, my name is Lindsay Young. I think I've met most of you. But I'm going to go over statewide financial aid and just some things that I think advisors should know. But I wanted to start off by saying that I want to keep this an open conversation. So if at any point you have questions, feel free to ask or chime in if you want to say something. I don't mind that at all. And this is my first attempt at Prezi, so hopefully it goes well. So let's get started. So this is basically an advisor's roadmap to statewide financial aid. And like I said, my name is Lindsay Young. And we are going to start out with financial aid basics for advisors. And just some things that I think you should be mentioning when you meet with students for the first time. Encourage students to be checking their Ferris email or forwarding their email onto another account. That is so important, especially for financial aid, because we send all of our financial aid emails, award notices, missing requirements emails to their Ferris email. So if they're not checking that, they're not getting really important information that they should be. In your packet that you got, we also included a general financial aid checklist and financial aid 101. And I would really appreciate it if you would hand this out to students. Now at some point I would like to work on making them site specific and sending them out to the specific sites so that you have that to give to students. But in the meantime, this is just very general. But it goes over things like checking your Ferris email, submitting your FAFSA, how to set up direct deposit, check your financial aid awards and your missing requirements. And then it goes over the consortium form and then possibly setting up a payment plan. So this is a really nice document to hand out to students. And then on the other side is just some basic financial aid 101 information, the difference between grants, where to find scholarships, loans, and work study. So a nice document to hand to students. When I go over financial aid with a student and they come in for an appointment with me, everything that I tell them in my appointment is on this checklist. So when I designed this, I made sure that everything that I was telling a student was going on this sheet, so that if they don't, have time to come in and meet with me, or if you don't have a financial aid advisor at your specific site, that you can give them this, and you'll feel comfortable knowing that they're getting the information that I tell them in an actual student appointment. Also referring students to the Admit Padfolio that we send out. The marketing team has designed this beautiful Padfolio that goes over registration, but it's got a lot of great information on financial aid, how to set up your Ferris email, all that good stuff. So, and then also the online orientation. We have just a statewide orientation, but there's site-specific information also on that orientation, so encouraging students to check out those resources as well. Mention the online consortium form if you can. If you know a student is going to be taking courses at the community college, encourage them to submit the online consortium form, and just mention that they may need to make payment at the community college. So those are the basic things that we hope advisors will kind of mention in their meetings with students. I don't expect you to be a financial aid officer or a guru about it. That's my position and what I get paid for. But to mention these things so that students are aware is just a nice reminder for them. Any questions? So referring a student to a regional site versus referring them to the financial aid office. Now, you can refer a student to the regional site for some general information like when are my refund dates, has my consortium form been received, holds on the account, things like that. But for specific information, we would prefer that you send the students to Sherry or I directly. Just because we don't want them getting, misinformation, because that creates even bigger of a problem. If they're concerned, is my Pell Grant going to be prorated if I'm taking this amount of credit hours? Or how is this going to affect my budget? How much should I take out for this semester? Things like that. We want you to send that over to Sherry and I. Now, I take care of the Grand Rapids, Lansing, and Muskegon students. Sherry kind of takes care of all of the other students statewide. Now, that's not to say that if Sherry is out of the office or you can't get a hold of her, that you can't contact me. I am available, and I can answer pretty much most questions. So. And also pointing out that not every student always needs an appointment. That's where this checklist comes in handy. I know that some advisors, they say, just go meet with financial aid. I don't deal with financial aid at all. And this checklist really is a huge help. Now, obviously, if they have issues with their financial aid or aren't understanding something, definitely schedule them an appointment with me. But not every student needs an appointment, and that's where that checklist, the online orientation, and the Padfolio are used as resources for students. So we are going to move on to satisfactory academic progress, because I know a lot of you have been getting some of the appeal forms and audit forms. So I wanted to talk a little bit about SAP. Federal regulations require that students make satisfactory academic progress towards the completion of the degree to be eligible for financial aid. So that means loans, grants, scholarships, work study. And there are 3 different components to the SAP policy. So the 3 different components are minimum GPA, completion rate, and degree progression. So minimum GPA means that undergraduate students must maintain a cumulative GPA of 2.0, and then graduate and doctorate students need to maintain a cumulative GPA of at least a 3.0. So if they are not meeting that criteria, they will get selected for SAP. Now, this becomes a little sticky sometimes with consortium students, because they might be taking only maybe 1 class here at Ferris, but they're taking some over at the community college, and maybe they really bombed their Ferris class. They would need to complete an appeal form, and maybe they did awesome over at their community college classes. We can take a look at that GPA as well. But in the minimum GPA, the community college is not calculated, so that's why they may be selected for SAP, and then they'll just need to complete an appeal form. So I'll explain the appeal form in just a little bit here, but completion rate, students need to complete with a passing grade a minimum of 67% of their courses. And so completing a course means that they received a D- or higher in that course, or a CR credit for that course. When they don't count for credit would be like if they have a failing grade or an incomplete, or if they withdrew from a course, they are not going to earn credit for that course. So that's where the completion rate comes into play. And if a student repeats a course, they only receive credits 1 time if they earned, a passing grade. So if they can keep, attempting them, they're going to keep going towards the attempted credit hours, but they can only earn for that class 1 time. So
You kind of lost me with that completion rate stuff. What do you mean per term? You have to complete 2/3 of your classes in a term?
not per term, it is cumulative. So
over what time frame?
over your Ferris classes and your community college as well. Completion rate for consortium students is based on your attempted and earned credit hours at both Ferris State University and the community college. So we're looking at both. So if a student, does not complete at least 67%, they are going to be selected for SAP. And they'll have to file an appeal if they choose to.
So they could technically be selected for SAP if their very first semester, they're under that 2/3 passing rate?
Absolutely. Okay. Yes. Yep. And then degree progression. Federal regulations require that financial aid recipients complete their degree within a specific amount of credit hours. So for the bachelor's degree, that's 180 credit hours. For an associate's degree, that's 90 credit hours. So if you see that a student has completed more than that, they are going to be selected for SAP. With consortium students, credits taken at the community college will be included in the total amount of credit hours and will be used to determine degree progression. Failing grades as well as incomplete grades, withdrawals, and repeated courses will be included in determining the maximum number of credit hours attempted. So those are the three components of satisfactory academic progress. But the student can appeal that decision because when they get selected for this, they have a probationary period. But if they don't meet the criteria after that probationary period, they will be suspended. And that's where this appeal comes in. We send out emails letting them know that they've been suspended from their financial aid, as well as a letter to their permanent address saying, hey, your financial aid has been canceled. You need to either appeal this or you need to, make other arrangements for payment to the university. They can appeal if they have extenuating circumstances. And then we'll go into the different forms that advisors will fill out for their students. But this is the appeal form, and this is found right on MyFSU under the Academics and Services tab, and then under Forms, Financial Aid Forms. If you click on that, you'll be able to pull this form up. So the student will fill this part of the form out. And so the reasons for denial are listed above. So if they're not meeting GPA requirements, degree progression, that will all be listed up top. And then, let's see, right down here, if you checked number 1 or 2, then the student knows that they need to have the advisor complete the evaluation form. And if they checked number 3, which is degree progression, they'll need to have their advisor complete the program audit form. And then if they checked all 3 of the above, they'll have to have the advisor complete both forms. And then the student will also need to turn out all of this information, but that's not something that the advisor needs to do. So.
And there's also a link, right, we referred earlier in Casey's slide where she showed you the student information advisor menu. The 2 links are right there in that long advisor menu as well.
Oh, thanks. I also forgot to mention in this academic advising financial aid tips, right here in the middle is all of the SAP information. So you can take a look at that. It'll explain the different components, and then also reinstatement of financial aid and suspension, probation, all of that good stuff right in here. So you have that there for you. So, like I said, advisors will need to either complete the academic evaluation form or the program audit form. So the student will contact you and ask you to complete this form. So I'm going to show you where that's located. On MyFSU, it's located under your advisor dashboard under the Faculty and Services tab. So you'll see Financial Aid SAP Evaluation Form and the SAP Program Audit Form. And we'll zoom in a little bit there so you can see that. So you'll click on the corresponding form that you need to complete. And right here we have the academic evaluation form pulled up. Now, Banner populates a lot of this information for you. So you can see this student right here. I know it's probably a little bit hard to see, but this student is not meeting the GPA requirement. They have a 0.93 GPA. So we have to have the advisor fill this out. Now you're gonna put in the remaining credit hours that the student needs to graduate, and based on that, Banner is going to calculate the cumulative GPA that a student needs to have per semester to meet our SAP requirement then, and for their aid to be reinstated. So it asks you to indicate courses that the student will be taking, and then also indicate some resources that the student might be utilizing in order to be successful when going for their degree. So sometimes it's a little bit harder off campus to find those resources, but maybe it's coming in and meeting with the advisor, weekly or something like that to make sure that they're doing okay in their courses, or you'll want to talk with the student about the strategies that they're taking to meet this. And then it does require you print this form out, and the student and also the advisor will need to sign this form. So that is the eval.
A lot of my students I never see, so is there a way to be able, that you guys will accept it without their signature?
Yeah,
I mean,
I think
I've
for,
done some, I can't remember what
yeah,
I did, but.
I think that Carla would probably make an exception, but it's best, usually to do face-to-face to talk with the student. But if you don't have that opportunity, there's always exceptions to the rule.
Do we give it to you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can give it to me, and I can get it up to the financial aid office in Big Rapids, because the person who reviews this is actually Carla Erlewine up in Big Rapids. She's in charge of this SAP program. So I would definitely get it up to Carla for you. Any other questions? And then this is the audit form. Now I am sure a lot more of you are going to be seeing the audit form because a lot of our students, are transferring over from the community college, may have gotten, another degree or something like that. And so they are over the amount of credit hours that they're allowed. So for instance, this student is enrolled in CIT, and that's a bachelor's degree, and the limit for the bachelor's degree is 180 credit hours. Well, this student has attempted 184 credit hours. So you're going to look through this form, and we've already put in the overall attempted amount of credit hours for you, and you're going to put in what courses the student is attempting for this current semester, and then the amount of credit hours that is ineligible for the primary program. So courses that are not going towards that primary degree, we want to know how many credit hours, because we're going to take that away from that top number up there, okay? And then the additional credit hours that they still need to get their primary degree and their expected graduation date, and then just hit continue, and then that'll automatically be sent to the financial aid office.
Question about credits that don't apply,
Mm-hmm.
ineligible credit hours. If we could drill into that just a minute, is that essentially just general credit in any class that they may, let's say they changed majors?
Sure, yeah.
So that would be ineligible because it's
Right.
not part of their credit
Anything-
major, but is it also general credit?
If they have to take general education requirements that are necessary for their Ferris degree, those would not be ineligible, but anything
Right.
else that's general education that does not go into that specific primary degree,
Not general education, but like transfer courses that just show up as like FSU general credit.
Anything that doesn't apply to that program.
Yes.
It would be,
It's not on the check sheet,
Yeah.
that's a good way. to
Anything
put
that you
it.
don't,
So that would
can't use it
be,
for
and then
electives
so,
or.
yes.
so if I get like a military transcript that has whatever, all these classes, that just come over as general credit,
Yep.
those are all ineligible.
Correct,
Yeah, okay.
yes, absolutely.
But it also would be like a business course when my students are education students, they took some business courses, it doesn't transfer in, even though it came as a class, it still
Absolutely.
is ineligible.
Yes, absolutely. As long as it does not go into their primary degree and, like Dion said, is not on their check sheet, then, that would be considered ineligible.
Lindsay, coming up with that number of 104, does that include the community college courses that we did not take? For example, it had a C- graded?
I believe it's all credit hours that were attempted
So
at the
C-,
community.
anything below C, we would take out as ineligible also.
Yes, it's
Yes.
wouldn't go to the program.
If
That
they
would-
got credit for it, then yes.
So if they got credit at Grand Rapids Community College for a class, they got a C- in it. When I'm figuring out the number of ineligible, I take those credits off.
Yes, that would be my assumption, would be to take those out because they're not going to transfer into the degree.
I'm sorry, so I'm still a little bit unclear. When I look at this, and I see the attempted number of credit hours,
Mm-hmm.
okay, is that what triggers this form, and then we're taking some of those credit hours out that are no longer
Yes.
eligible? So they could have 200 credit hours and they decide to change majors, and we just take all that out.
And that's what we see a lot of times is
Okay.
that a student started out in one area and now they're, changing their degree program to something else. So they've got a slew of credits, but they're not going into that new program they're not transferring into that new program. So we're trying to weed out the credit hours that are not eligible for that primary program.
So what does that mean to the student then? Does that mean that if they change majors, those credits fall off and they're not going to lose their financial aid?
Correct. So if we get
Okay.
under the 180 credit hours with
Yeah.
this calculation, we'll reinstate their financial aid. But if they, I don't remember what I was saying now, I just saw your arm go off and I,
But if they-
Reinstating their financial aid, so I
Yeah.
guess I thought these were like hard numbers from like the federal government. That if
No.
they attempted this many.
well, yes, those are from the federal government, but we are able to use our professional judgment and use these forms to calculate, if they're under the 180 credit hour mark, going towards their primary degree that they're, going towards now or whatever, we can take those ineligible credit hours out. And then if they're under the 180 credit hours, we can reinstate their financial aid.
But even taking those out, when you calculate what they need for the program, if they're over 180, you may not reinstate it.
Right.
They may not be eligible for it. So it's at 180.
Based on what criteria, I guess, but,
Well, based on, you've got a total number they've taken, let's say they've taken
Yeah.
200.
yeah,
You knock off 100, okay? So they're down to 100,
yeah.
okay? But if they still needed 100 more to finish the program they're in now, they'd be back up to 200, and they may not be eligible
Oh,
again.
I see,
Yeah,
I see.
exactly.
I see.
Thank you.
We're adding those back in,
Yeah.
the additional.
What they
credits.
need to finish.
And then we're looking at these caps again, yeah, okay.
So once they've triggered
Huh.
this,
Mm-hmm.
it's not like their total numbers are ever gonna go down. So are we gonna have to do that every semester?
It depends.
Oh, I love
Like
that.
everything in financial aid. Sometimes if a student calls me, I can send an email to Carla saying, hey, is this really necessary? Because, we're going to be asking students usually every spring semester to complete it again. And so if a student contacts me directly, sometimes I can say, do we really need to have the student go through this entire appeal process? Not always. And so we might be able to just waive that through until, the next aid year or something like that.
The other thing that happens, I've had happen, is students that aren't using financial aid, but still have too many credits.
Yes.
Yeah, is it just, it's like an all or
It's
nothing.
really, yes. And another coworker asked me that because she ran into this issue. And if they're not receiving financial aid, they don't need to complete this. But rather than sending them out individually, every time they submit a FAFSA or something like that, we just send it out to everybody, and then you can choose to appeal or not. Mm-hmm.
I think part of whether they're going to be reinstated also depends on how much they've already taken in financial aid. They can't exceed a certain dollar amount. I think it's what, 57?
Yep, it depends on, if they're an independent or a dependent student. but the maximum for an independent student is $57,500. So we send out notifications when students are getting close to those maximums, maximums for Pell Grants and things like that as well. So they are notified, but this actually does not have anything to do with those maxes. These are just, the degree progression, the completion rate, and the minimum GPA requirements.
Go ahead.
In the example that was given over there with you're at 100 credits and you need 100 more, and SAP was triggered because they got it. Do we grant them financial aid up until they're back up in that checklist where they're cut off?
When they get back over the 180 credit hours, that's when they would be cut off from financial aid. And then we may need to have another SAP form done because maybe some of those credits.
I'm really confused how that could even happen.
I don't think it
You
can.
have 130 credits to graduate, if you subtract that from anything that doesn't count,
Right.
how could you ever get to 180?
I have that a lot.
How does that happen?
I have maritime students who have a whole degree that they've earned in total field.
But don't those get wiped out, it's not part of your current degree, and then that brings the total back down?
Yeah, they still may have 100 more to go because they're so early in the program.
But they're not counting towards the 180.
Well, yeah, they are. The new ones are. You start with the base, you gotta add the new ones in.
The new degree credits are then counted into the 180. You wipe out these, but then you add in all the other ones, but they're gonna be.
And we don't see a lot of that, honestly. It's when students are usually getting to the end of their program that, you might see it, where they're getting up to that 180 credit hours, and then we just have them do the appeal. I don't see a whole lot of students get denied for this reason, to be quite honest.
And what I will say about financial aid is, financial aid, and I wouldn't be in her role if you paid me $1 million, but they are not advisors, and so part of when you find that you're having trouble with a SAP appeal form or an audit form, that's where these relationships that we're forming statewide and through your other colleagues that are advisors, those are really good questions to say, hey, help me through this. Because financial aid, they have their own demon that they're dealing with. And so for Lindsay's sake, yeah, she's not an advisor, so answering some of those detailed questions about which ones should I accept, which ones shouldn't I, that's where financial aid draws the line, just as they want you to draw the line to say, I'm not a financial aid officer. And so just thought that was worth mentioning.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just have one more real quick. So the expected graduation date is a guess at best, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So what implications does that have, if any, on the student's financial aid?
You're not held to that expected graduation date.
But if it's not accurate, or if it's too soon or too late, I mean, I just.
None really.
None really? Okay.
I don't think.
So you just put your best guess on it
Yes.
based on how they're
Yeah.
progressing, and don't worry about it.
Absolutely.
I just had that situation. I filled out a SAT form last summer for a student, said she would graduate by the end of this summer, and she didn't. She won't graduate till the end of fall. And Carla just emailed me and said, do you want to, just email me and let me know if she truly will graduate in December. And I responded back yes. And so she extended it one more semester for the student.
Oh, so you will get notified if that date expires?
Yeah.
Okay.
You'll have to, if the student is one semester away, you could just respond back to Carla. Otherwise, if it's way off, then you'll have to refill it more.
Okay. Okay. So, shoot long.
Better be long.
I'm not sure if you're going to get to this or not, but in the Detroit area, we get ITT students transferring in. And
Okay.
about your dollar amount, like we will have some people with an associate's that owe 50,000. So are you telling me that they're only gonna get 7.5 more?
From federal direct loans. Now they can take out alternative loans or, search for scholarships, but absolutely, if they are already to $50,000, and sometimes we have students that transfer in here to Ferris and they've already met their $57,500, and that's a federal regulation and we can't mess with the feds. So,
I think that's why you see the push for more of that financial planning, and main campus financial aid has done a pretty good job putting out some kind of financial management, planning purposefully. You know, long-term, 57,000 in that payment that you're gonna have to pay back per month with some of that interest, and interest rates just went up if you're following anything with federal policies in regards to financial aid. So it is a pretty scary picture, especially when we're talking about alternative loans, which can be as high as a credit card interest rate. And so having that conversation when they come in the door, and that's why I like the Michigan Works process. It's the one thing I like about Michigan Works is if you've ever had to work with a student, you literally have to build a plan from start to finish, and it even breaks it down with a financial plan. And so that is really helpful, because I don't think a lot of students truly realize what 57,000 plus, if they get alternative loans, into debt, what payment that's going to accumulate to when they graduate. And that's a really scary picture, because in this job market, and depending on what entry level you get, your payment can be, like mine, about as much as my house payment. So
Can you clarify what the 57.5 is?
That's the undergraduate loan limit for an independent student, and it's 33,000 for a dependent student. So the difference between a dependent versus an independent student, a dependent student, well, I guess on the FAFSA they have 13 different questions. And if you can answer yes to any of those questions on the FAFSA, you are considered an independent student. So it's being over the age of 24, if you're married, if you're pursuing a master's degree, if you've been in the armed services, if you are a ward of the court or an orphan, things like that will all make you an independent student. But I always get the question, students come in and they say, well, I don't live with my parents and they don't pay for anything. I'm not dependent, but technically in the eyes of the government, they are considered a dependent student. So a dependent student has a different lifetime limit than the independent student. And it's, about...
Is it tied back to their tax filing? They're under their parents or they're
Nope,
not?
it does not matter if their parents claim them on their taxes or not. That will not make them independent.
But once they turn 24 or get married or whatever, that
Yeah.
status changes.
Right.
Are schools like ITT required, when people register there, to notify them about the limits, the 57.5? Is that a federal requirement?
I can't speak for other schools, I'm not sure, but we always have, when a student goes out and accepts financial aid, little bits of information, so saying, this is the loan limit, if they're, eligible for a Pell Grant, your Pell Grant is going to be prorated based on the amount of credit hours that you're taking. If you're taking out loans, you need to be enrolled in at least 6 credit hours. So us here at Ferris, we are very proactive about giving them that information. I don't know about ITT, if they're giving that information or not. However, when they accept a loan through the federal government, they are required to complete entrance counseling and a master promissory note. And that entrance counseling gives them every bit of information. Whether or not they read it is, one thing. So, they are getting the information, and they're getting the information, from direct loans. It's hard for a student to claim that they're not getting information from all directions, because they are. It's just a matter if they're reading it or not, I think.
Maybe this is off topic, but a question I get a lot of times is, I'm a student, I want to move to Grand Rapids and establish residency and get GRCC rates. And so what, I'm not really clear on what residency really stands for.
And I think they need to be directed to the community college for that piece, because I can't really speak for the community college, and they determine that information. And it's probably different at every single CC as well.
yes.
Do you want to add to that at all?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Every CC, every college will have their own residency requirements.
question. Is that policy available online at GRCC?
Oh, yeah,
Is that,
all I
resources
did
on there?
is right at grcc.edu and in the search menu, I put residency, pops right up.
Alrighty. So now we are going to move on to the consortium agreement. And I know we're all pretty familiar with that, but a consortium agreement is, means that students who are admitted to a statewide program may earn their degree at a statewide site, and so taking classes at the community college and receive financial aid to cover their community college expenses. So this is the consortium form that I just filled out as an example. So for fall, I put in GRCC, and my program is criminal justice. So, Mike, I would send this form on to Mike. Mike is going to receive this in his email, and he's going to look it over to make sure that those courses that I'm taking at GRCC are applicable to my Ferris degree. Now, I don't think you can probably see this, but I'm taking CJ 101, Math 101, and Basket Weaving 101. And so Basket Weaving 101 does not fit into the program for Ferris, the criminal justice program. So Mike is going to send me back an email saying 6 out of these 9 credit hours are approved. What I'm going to do is register this student into a fake class called LLLS 100. So if the student sees that on their schedule, please encourage them not to delete it. What it does is it tells us the amount of credit hours that they're approved at the community college. What it does is it tricks our financial aid system to say, okay, this student doesn't just have 3 credits here at Ferris. They've got 6 approved credit hours over at GRCC, so that we can award them the correct amount of financial aid based on those credit hours. And so with that being said, Mike should be contacting the student to say, hey, Basket Weaving 101 is not a course needed for your Ferris degree. If you want to take that course, that's fine. We cannot cover that course with financial aid, so just be aware. But here are some courses that would be better suited for your program. Now, the reason that we have the advisor contact the student rather than us contacting the student is because when I have to contact a student and say, that course was not approved, well, why not? And I don't know that answer because I'm not trained in that advising area. So it's very important that the advisor contact the student, say, that course is not approved. You can take it if you choose to, but we're not going to pay for it. Okay?
Macro.
Yes.
I could make Ferris criteria, or I can do macro. I could actually end up taking more cultural through macro than I could approve through Ferris criteria. Where does that all play into?
And you actually just transitioned me perfectly into my next slide. Way to go, Joe. Approval of courses. So this is on our consortium agreement, but this is federal regulations that Ferris State University shall in no instance be responsible for financial aid to cover tuition or fees for a community college class that is not part of a signed articulation agreement. In accordance with federal regulation 34 CFR 668.5, regarding consortium agreements, a student can only receive financial aid assistance for courses that are applicable to the student's degree program. So what should be approved? And obviously all courses that are needed for the degree program. Prerequisites can be approved. So if a student needs Math 107, but they need to take Math 098 or whatever before it, we can approve that course. We can also approve courses that are needed for the macro. So if a student comes to you and says, I'm taking this course because I need it for the macro, that can be approved. And then electives needed to obtain credit hours to graduate. I've seen this in criminal justice quite a few times where they need 120 credit hours to graduate, but maybe they only have, or they satisfied all other requirements and they have 118 credit hours, so they need 2 more to graduate. So you can approve, a random 2 credit class or whatever. Sometimes, I'll see Mike approve a wellness course so that they can get up to that amount of credit hours that they need to graduate, as long as they fulfilled all their
I
other
have a question. So,
requirements.
It's macro. For the other advisors, are you doing a macro sheet on them and also filling it in as it comes in on Ferris criteria to know which path they're using, macro or Ferris, and am I approving something that shouldn't be approved?
I go back and forth. I don't maintain a macro sheet, but I analyze what they're doing and I question them. Are you going to earn the macro stamp? Otherwise, you shouldn't be taking this class.
Because if that's my responsibility to Ferris, I'm very good with saying seeking macro.
Yeah.
But I am not, you're not verifying that what they're taking, you're not going back to GRCC's macro sheet or Moncom's community macro sheet or anybody else's macro sheet and verifying they're actually taking classes toward the macro.
Yes, I am.
And
So for every different community college, you have macro sheets that you're dealing with? Okay, too. So you are verifying it in that manner?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know
didn't
something John Backstrom used to do, which is, obviously, the community college is really the macro expert, because it's their macro policy. So I know John Backstrom used to send a student and have the resource and say, if you're interested in macro, go and see this counselor, come back with your macro sheet, because a lot of them will identify, you need, 2 classes in this box, you need 1 class in this box. And that's a helpful thing, I think, as an advisor, to have a copy of, or at least view that, so that you can have that conversation with the student to make sure that they really truly are taking the course that they need to not only get macro, but that makes sense for their degree plan. So that's one way to do it.
Okay. So courses that should not be approved are courses that are needed only for a degree at the community college. So for instance, we have some hotel management students that are enrolled in an associate's degree at GRCC and then also are going towards hotel management here at Ferris. And so if they only need the course to fulfill a requirement for that associate's degree at CC, we cannot cover that with financial aid. But if that course is needed for the associate's degree and for the bachelor's degree here at Ferris, we can cover that.
What if the associate's degree is needed for the bachelor's?
Then we can. Then we can cover that. Yes.
The student interface with the consortium form, is this clear to them when they're filling this out, what is approved and what is not approved?
I think it's something that we probably would be telling them.
Yeah, I would assume that that would probably be a conversation that the advisor.
It would be nice if the form, because we may not see them before they fill out the consortium. It'd be nice if the consortium form was clear. Their interface right there would be on what is approved, what is not.
Yeah, just so you know, there, in all of our communication about financial aid, it clearly states that you will receive financial aid for classes approved for your degree plan. And so we're hoping through that conversation with their advisor that that's also reiterated, but that can be found in all of our language.
A process improvement, if it's not clear when they go complete the consortium form.
I think there is a statement, isn't there, that
There's a
says,
statement, there's a statement, but not clearly what's approved and what's not approved, I don't believe.
Well, and I think where it comes into play the most is like the BIS, biz admin protract, directed electives, where there is not that one prescribed. So for some, it would make more sense than others.
Yeah, and we can have a conversation about that with Sherry Edstrom, since she's, the coordinator, and, determine that at a later time.
Lindsay, is there on the stuff that goes out about the consortium, when it says to fill out the form, does it say something like only fill out the form once you've registered for the class?
Yes, absolutely.
Because I get a ton of
Yes.
and they haven't even registered for the
I know. We do send out
tend to take.
between 4 and 5 emails per semester reminding students, hey, once you are registered for your classes at the community college, be sure to submit your consortium form. But like I said, whether they read those emails or not, yes.
I just had the same situation. I had called the student and said, well, I only see 3 in your active registration. Ferris, but you claim you're
Yeah, sure.
The other good thing when approving to take a look at is what they're currently registered at Ferris. We've had a couple of students who submit a consortium form for 12 credits at the community college when they're already registered for 10 credits at Ferris. And that's where that conversation about credit load and time management and so even looking at their current Ferris and not assuming that if they're submitting one for 12 credits, that's the only classes they have on the system. So taking a look at their Ferris schedule.
I have a question about, so if they are on a wait list for a community college class, they would have to maybe do a new consortium if they got into that?
Correct. That's what we would encourage them to do.
If they got into one, they were registered for one and on a wait list for another, when they fill out this, and so they got in, 2 weeks later or something, do they only add the new class?
No, they will submit a consortium form for all of the courses that they're taking at the community. Absolutely, yes. Yep, that way we can void out the previous consortium form and keep that new one on file for them.
One chunk of credits, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. Good questions. So other things that should not be approved are courses needed for the certificate programs. Those are not aid eligible. And then also if they're graduated from their degree program, we don't want you approving more credits. We've had that a few times where a student has completely graduated and we might not catch it in financial aid because it won't yet say that it's inactive due to graduation. So we'll forward it on and the advisor will send it back to us saying, yeah, those classes are approved, but they're already graduated. So Sherry wanted me to add that in because she's seen a few of those. I haven't personally, but.
I was just wondering on that for certificate and for the graduated, is there any filter that would automatically flag or catch that? When I'm meeting with a student, I couldn't right offhand remember, is this student only a certificate student or is it
If they're only a certificate student, and there are some education certificates that are okay for eligibility for financial aid, but for the most part, no certificates are available. But if I get a consortium form and I look it over and they're just doing some certain, I don't know, Homeland Security certificate or something like that.
Say right on there that their major is a certificate?
Yes, and then I will go ahead and say, I'll email them back saying that's not an aid eligible program. You will have to pay out of pocket for that, but thank you for submitting your consortium form. So yes, there are ways that we weed it out. Sometimes there's a lapse of time where they're graduated, but it's not input into the system, so we send out the form. So, we just want you to be aware that if you catch that they're graduated, don't submit the form, because it might just be,
Just an exception to the certificate programs not being eligible is if they are useful to fulfill electives. They would be double dip.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Okay. So I'm running low on time, so I want to just make sure I get some more of this information out. The student can check to see if their consortium form has been approved or not. So if they go to My FSU and under their Academics and Services tab, under Student Requirements, it will show under Unsatisfied Requirements, the consortium form for the fall semester was received from the advisor. Now, a lot of students call me and they say, well, should I submit a new form? It's not satisfied. And it will say that it's received from the advisor after you guys have approved it until after the community college's 100% refund date. So it's still been received and approved by the advisor. We just are not going to satisfy that requirement until after the 100% refund date. So they can find this information out there online. And then I also wanted to show you that under the student schedule, I just went and added myself into a consortium class for Lansing. It will show that it says LLLS 100 Financial Aid Off-Campus Special. And so it'll show that I'm enrolled in that class, and that just means that I have 6 credits over at the community college that have been approved by my advisor.
Often when we're answering questions at the front desk, 9 out of 10 times a student can find that answer out themselves. So we really try to answer them in a way that obviously gives them the answer that they were calling for, but to educate them about how they can find that out themselves. So all of those phone calls that we receive, which it would be horrible to track about, did my consortium form, did you receive my consortium form? They can truly find that out themselves. And so part of what we're trying to do is not only educate them on the answer, but also to let them know, here's how you can be able to see that. So you don't have to call back every semester for that same question.
And then a new change that should be coming here shortly, so keep an eye on your email, but that consortium forms that have been approved by you in previous semesters will be viewable to advisors via Extender. In the near future, Sarah Dew, the Director of Financial Aid up in Main campus, has decided that that would be nice for for advisors to know what they've approved in previous semesters. So those get logged on after the 100% refund date at the community college. So for the current semester, you won't have that information. So Katie Lair does a great job of logging that information right onto the comments section on Banner, what she's approved, so that you might find that to be helpful, but they also will be accessible via Extender. So. And then there's some changes coming for fall 2013. I'm not going to go too in-depth about them, but there's now going to be a consortium policy versus a transfer student policy because financial aid wasn't meeting some of the regulations. And then there's also going to be some changes with the subsidized loan. So the consortium versus transfer policy, beginning fall 2013, compliance with federal financial aid regulations require that Ferris students who receive financial aid from Ferris and take classes at the community college be subject to the same academic standards that on-campus students are. So courses that are transferring in and being articulated for students are going to be the same for consortium students as they will be for on-campus students.
Wait a second.
Okay, can I chime in? When a student is being reviewed for admission, so they're at Casey, they are coming in with the Ferris transfer policy, meaning we are only putting on the system the grades or the courses that they get through transfer articulation.
C or higher.
Follows the C or better policy. Yep. So they follow, when they come in through the Ferris State University transfer policy. The moment they submit a consortium form and they're receiving aid for a community college course, that's where this new policy, they become under the consortium transfer student. And again, they have to submit that consortium form. That is what identifies them as a consortium transfer policy. That's when all classes, regardless of grade, will come over. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that that will meet the program requirement that they need, but it will come over as an articulated course.
So
and really,
not all prior, right.
just that semester is what they're looking at.
So all CJ students need to be admitted consortium students before they take the math class? Because a D- will count, correct?
But not if it doesn't meet the program requirement.
It has to be a C or better for the gen ed requirement. You know what I mean? The extra.
But really what it does, it's not so much on your end, it's not gonna help those students, you know, if it doesn't meet the programmatic requirement, it's not going to transfer in. Really what it's doing is it's capturing students so that we can better report satisfactory academic progress.
You better go more detail on this. There's a couple of us going, what the hell are you talking about? with a below a C transfer, you know, we're all been using that C's the cutoff. If it doesn't come in before or after, it's not counting. Did I just hear it's now going to count after they've been admitted and they're a current consortium person?
It's going to be articulated on the transcript. an admissions person or records person, so I don't
You
know.
wanna clarify?
Well, okay, so essentially, obviously, you know, we're all familiar with it's a SEER hire to transfer in. Consortium students are treated as native students. If a D minus is acceptable for a native student, it's acceptable for a consortium student. Only if they have it, but they have to be a consortium student. So every transfer student is not treated the same. You have a transfer student now, and you have a transfer student consortium student.
And that's determined,
How are we gonna keep track of that?
Well-
If they have a consortium form.
yeah,
But
it's
how-
determined on if the
But they-
student submits a form.
When a D from Schoolcraft comes over, how am I going to know on that student if that's a consortium or they just paid out for that?
Because they'll get credit on their record, you'll now see that they got credit for that D, where usually.
Whereas it doesn't get posted to
Zero.
the transcript if it's.
When they're first admitted, so I'm a student, I had a D in English, 101, whatever, at the community college. I'm applying to Ferris, I've sent my transcripts. You don't know if I'm gonna be financial aid or not yet. So at that point, that an admissions decision is being made, you're not looking at the D. It's not on my transfer credit articulation screen.
It's on there, but you don't.
It's
get
on there with
credit
a
for it.
D,
Right.
yeah, and so the credits
Right,
didn't
right,
transfer into Ferris yet. Now I'm in my first semester and I submit a consortium form. Do you go back and put that D on my transcript?
No.
But if for a new class, now I'm taking my Comp 2 class at the community college,
that's
which I also got a D, because I stink. So that class will show up on my, when I send transcripts, that will show up.
And this is not a Ferris decision, this is a legislative decision, this is not a Ferris issue. It's something that we're mandated, we have to do
And it's
this.
because we have to track it for satisfactory academic
Yeah.
progress, all courses, not just what they take.
So then, going back to the satisfactory, two things. Going back to the satisfactory academic progress report, the C minus doesn't get taken out if it's a consortium class and we've taken the C minus.
Everything gets taken out for that.
Well, no, it doesn't, not if the C minus comes over. If they got a C minus in math 107 and now we're taking it, that doesn't get taken out, right?
Oh, good question.
Because before, when we were talking about, hey, they got 104, but we take out the C minuses because we don't take them, well, yes, we do take them.
If you can apply it to the program and then you don't take it out.
Okay, but how, now, this isn't a financial aid necessarily, it's not your policy, but how is that fair? If I can pay for my class and don't get financial aid, I've got to get a C. But the student who can't pay for his class, he only has to get a D minus. Right?
The line of fire, I opened up a can of worms.
Is that where we're at?
And here's the thing,
Is that correct, what he just said?
That is correct. We have had, Public has had a committee, a consortium committee for many months, I feel like it's been a couple years now. But it really hasn't, it's only been, in the last probably 8 months. When we figured out that we need to be in compliance with federal regulations. And so it's not necessarily a matter about, is it fair? Because we've been through that argument in many meetings.
And we're gonna tell you, we don't think it is either, but.
Right.
We don't get to say it.
But ultimately, we need to follow this for federal regulation. So if you think of it in terms of when we are giving federal aid for a course that a student is taking at a partner institution, because this even applies to students, study abroad students. In a sense, it's as if they're taking it at Ferris, okay? That's how the federal guys, that's how they see that. And so if a student has earned a D in a Ferris class, and that can be counted, same goes for a class that they got federal aid for, filled out a consortium form for. Does that make sense?
But we're not allowing that grade point to come across, right? That D in math at Schoolcraft is not going to affect the Ferris GPA and lower that so that we're looking at that.
Yeah, it's calculated in when they do that SAP form, they're adding those in, aren't you?
But you only do
No.
that when you.
The GPA?
No.
The GPA, no. We don't add.
It will not count to the GPA, and then we're lowering that, because anything from community college is not coming in, and I believe that breaches the program. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
Well, it
but
doesn't
it's
come in
acceptable
now.
for a native student, so if it's acceptable for a
And-
native student, it's acceptable for a consortium student.
Right, but if you're taking math and history and all that from Ferris, and you're getting a couple of Ds in it, it's lowering that grade point, and you're getting an accurate look of what that student has done. But if you're taking those at community college, and we're accepting them as transfer classes, then it's not. We're still have this Ferris GPA, even though they've done Ds over here.
But we still have that now.
No, it doesn't count. They gotta get a C or
GPA
higher.
never counts in your GPA, you know,
No,
when
it doesn't
just a
count in the
transfer.
GPA though. They may have to repeat the course, but they're
The
not,
credits
it still doesn't reflect.
Today.
The credits transfer,
The
yes,
credits
but the
will.
GPAs, when you transfer credits from a community college or from a university to university, the GPA does not transfer, the credits transfer.
Right, and then programmatic requirements would be a difference.
It's
And a math class.
I mean, if it
And
had to
you
be a
get
C or
Ds and all
better
of
for
those.
Then it has
programmatic
to be
Now we're
requirements,
getting
then
credit
it's still
for
not gonna work in
But if
terms of
you
rejection.
took
Which is the
Spanish,
same for
history,
native
math,
students.
and Ferris, that core GPA will start to affect, and then you're getting the proper flag or whatever as far as progress.
That thing is, they sat right next to that guy, and you're counting his and you're not counting mine.
Signed this fall, right? It has nothing to do with when they transfer in, it's the consortium form they start
Starting this
signing.
fall, right, any submitted consortium form,
For those 4 classes or whatever, those are the classes that will count if they've got a D.
Let's move the table.
You know, this is becoming a bigger discussion. I think what, you know, if you could, please either write your questions down and hand them to Dawn. I think Dawn and Dee Dee and Lindsay are on that committee and they can take it back to the committee. And maybe that'll be helpful in them creating the question and answer form to present later on. Or email any one of the 3, any questions you have. I mean, we put a copy of this in your packet, so look it over, think about it, give scenarios, give some questions. I mean, these are good questions to have, and I think it's really important that they are able to take these type of questions back to the committee.
yeah, and what we will also do is we will also send you out, because there is a plan, someone had asked, okay, well, what's happening, how does it happen? So financial aid from now on out, starting fall, will get a transcript, a paper transcript.
Hold on,
from the student that
hold
will-
on. Can we get everybody's attention for a minute? Now, would you say that again?
We will also send you out because there's a whole process to this that includes financial aid, includes all the dean's offices. And so as far as when a transcript comes in and when it gets to the dean's office, the timeline that needs to go on to the transfer articulation. And it sounds like obviously there's a lot of questions and nothing that the committee is surprised at. So, you know, it might be worth writing down questions so that when we, you know, shortly maybe can have a forum, maybe an online discussion where those questions can be answered so you can understand the process. The other thing that committee has put together, which you will all be sent here shortly, is a helpful consortium brochure. It's a little pamphlet that helps explain to students, especially prospective students and new students, about what does it mean to be a consortium student. And so it has terminology on there, terms to know. It has the macro policy, it has the consortium transfer policy, and it has different just things to know about being a consortium student. We'll make sure you have enough copies so that's something you can give out to students, but we'll also make sure that you have all of your questions answered in a good format. So if you can put those down, we'll make sure to answer those and set up kind of an online discussion for all of us to better understand. But yeah, it's not about fair, it's about keeping with federal regulations. So.
And I can assure you, we've had these same discussions in our committee meetings, so we're just as frustrated as you are, but we know that we have to build on what we've been given with the federal guidelines.
And other universities do this.
Correct.
Everyone has to.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
federal.
Yes.
So yes, please, I encourage you to either write them down on paper and hand them to any one of the 3 today, or email, or however is comfortable to you get those questions. I mean, you may just go back to your office and then a question will come up. Please, feel free to email.
Do you want to show them something?
Dawn or Lindsay,
I've
any
got
questions you may have.
just a
Lindsay, you wanna
not too
finish
much.
up?
Sure. one of the positive things that is coming out of this policy, now that I've caused a huge uproar, is that the community colleges will be required each semester that a consortium form is submitted to us. For those students, they are required to send over an updated transcript. So no more hunting down students saying, please turn in your transcript, please turn in your transcript, because we're going to have that sent to us every semester now. So there's one positive point on that. So moving along, and we'll have a discussion at a later date about that, but there are going to be some changes coming up with subsidized loans. And so be keeping a lookout on your email. I'll send you some more information as that comes, as far as that's concerned. So I just have some financial aid fun facts that I wanted to end with. Budgeting for summer. A lot of students will come to me and they'll say, my advisor said that I'm not going to have any financial aid left for the summer semester. And sometimes that is true because financial aid is split in half for fall and half for spring. Does not take into account the summer semester. But sometimes, if they're only enrolled maybe part-time, they can have additional Pell eligibility left over for the summer semester. So if your student is concerned about if they're going to have eligibility for summer semester, please send them along my way and I'd be happy to talk to them about budgeting.
This is
Do you want
really
to add?
important for any program that does require classes to be taken in summer. So when you're talking to a student about their plan and you're going through, fall semester you should take this, spring semester you should take this, and summer you have to take this, that's where to say, you might want to have a conversation with financial aid. Because it's not that there is no aid, it's that the student might have said yes to all of their financial aid and spent that money, rather than saying, no, let's hold off. I only need to accept $2,000 of my $4,000 award.
I know I have my internship this summer.
Right, because I want to have money for my internship this summer. And so it's more about planning purposefully if they're going to plan for summer courses.
Credit hours needed for aid to disperse. Now this is just very general information, but for the Pell Grant, that is prorated based on the amount of credit hours that the student is enrolled in. So below 6 credit hours, 25%. 6 to 8 credit hours is 50% of the Pell. 9 to 11 is 75% of the Pell Grant, and then 12 or more is the full 100%. Now, a general rule of thumb is that grants are prorated based on the amount of credit hours. Scholarships, they're all over the place. That student will need to check with what scholarships they've applied for to see how many credit hours they need for that to disperse. And then the general rule for loans is that they need to be enrolled in at least 6 credit hours or half-time in order for their loans to disperse. So another good bit of information is that if they do only accept a partial amount of their financial aid, maybe they're only taking 3 credit hours for the summer semester, that loan isn't going to disperse if they're only enrolled in 3 credit hours, unless it's, an internship that's considered full-time or something like that. So that's just a little bit about the credit hours that are needed for aid to disperse. Statewide scholarships. On our ferris.edu/statewide page, we have 10 different scholarships which are specifically designed for our students that are off campus. So it'd be encouraging students, if you meet an adult learner student, say, hey, we've got this scholarship out there. Make sure you check out our scholarships page. We send out emails periodically to encourage students to apply for scholarships, but just, so that you know that that's out there.
Lindsay, do we have any scholarships that our fully online students are eligible for?
Not at this point, but at some point we possibly will be looking at that. But yeah, not for fully online students, so. And then the program change form. Casey touched on this a little bit, but we did now add this little blurb that asks if the student has been, directed to speak with the financial aid office to understand the implications of the program change. Now, this is excuse me, especially important when a student is transferring from main campus to an off-campus or online site or vice versa. because their financial aid could change. If a student is awarded a WNF scholarship up on the main campus and are coming to a Grand Rapids or statewide program, they're going to lose that scholarship because our students statewide are not eligible for the WNF scholarships. So when a student is, changing their site or something like that, we want to have that student directed to us so that they understand before they go through this program change form that, hey, I'm going to lose my $5,000 scholarship. I really need to think twice before I go ahead and make that change, so that we can really have a good conversation about that. So.
And also for honors and athletes too.
Yes, absolutely.
Real quick, to go back to credits, we often hear students that say, well, I don't really need any extra courses, but I need to be at 12 credits to receive financial aid. Unless it's a policy, like they're on their parents' insurance and it's requiring them to be full-time, a lot of times if you do the math and you can send them to financial aid to check, the math doesn't add up. So they're not going to receive that much more financial aid to just take a class that they don't need, because they're going to be paying out over $1,000 for that class. They're not going to get that much more financial aid. I think some students think that, and so sometimes sending them back, if you hear them say that, say talk to financial aid, because it's just really a math problem, and Lindsay will do that math for them to show them that it's not worth them just taking a 3-credit course to take it, thinking that they're going to get more financial aid.
Okay, so we might want to save questions for lunchtime since I went way over my time and caused an uproar, but I appreciate everyone for listening to me, and I hope that you found this very helpful. And feel free to contact me if you have any questions. So.